Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce Advocacy Update and Town Hall. My name is Allison Mitchell and I'm part of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce team. Before we start our webinar, there are a few housekeeping items that I'd like to share. Your microphone should be on mute, but if you could double check that to reduce background noise, I would appreciate it. Our presenters will be providing an update from the Chamber in terms of advocacy. We do want to hear your experiences and questions during this time, so please feel free to type any questions and comments into the questions box in your control panel throughout the webinar. At the end, all webinar registrants will receive a copy of this webinar in a follow-up email. Our speakers today are Ian McLean, President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce, as well as Art Sinclair, Vice President, Public Policy and Advocacy with the Chamber. I would like now to invite Ian to start us off.
Well, thank you and good afternoon. Well, welcome, and I appreciate everyone taking time out of your busy schedule today to join us. We're working hard as a team. Of course, as we've let you know before, we're all working from home, as many of you are. So the entire chamber team are at home. We're doing trying to gather information, help business with the challenges that they face. Part of what we're doing also is reaching out to each of our members. We've called everybody, send emails, and we want to be in touch with you about the challenges you face, how the government programs that have been announced thus far are working or not, as the case may be. We do want to hear from you, and there's a number of different ways, and I'll repeat that several times through this session. Feel free to reach out to myself or anyone on the Chamber team with questions or comments, suggestions that you have. We'd love to hear. We're also partnering with the Toronto Region Board of Trade every 2 weeks on a survey, and I'll come back to that. But replying to our or participating in our surveys is very useful for us, so we understand what you're feeling and how that fits into the business environment in the innovation corridor between here and Toronto. On a daily basis, I hope most of you are receiving our daily update from the Chamber every day around 3 or 4 o'clock. We provide an update on everything from the public health aspects of the situation to government program updates from all levels of government, provincially, federally, municipally. And we are in constant contact with our partners at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and again, the Toronto Region Board of Trade and our partners through the Innovation Corridor. So there's lots of materials. We want to make sure that you have current quality information that you can rely on a daily basis. So we'll continue to do that in the coming day or daily for the foreseeable future. We are, as I said, we're trying to listen to the challenges that business face and what we can do to support you in these difficult times. We have, and this is one webinar, I think we've run now over a dozen webinars, and we'll be continuing to do that on everything from HR issues, legal issues, the government programs, business continuity, our Shop KW or online e-commerce, all things that we think are pretty valuable and important information for you to have as we all get through this together. We are also making plans, and I'm pleased my staff been hard at work looking at how we provide virtual opportunities for us to get together, whether that's on networking events or educational programs. So we're going to be doing some of that in the coming weeks. Our first, we're pleased that we're going to be holding LeaderCast on May the 7th. It is a simulcast event, so it lent itself to us being able to do this in a virtual basis on May 7th. You can find more information on that on our website about the event, and as other events are confirmed, we'll provide that in our daily updates, but it's also available on our website. Things like we will start to re-engage with a virtual network breakfast series event, CYP, and Energy and Environment Forum. We're also exploring doing the manufacturing summit in a virtual environment. So We're going to find ways for us to connect and for you to network with your colleagues within the chamber and get the information that you need. We'll touch on, and Art will maybe start, but we'll touch a little bit through this time together around Best Waterloo, which is the business and economic support team of Waterloo Region, and that's we are providing some of that leadership along with the Cambridge Chamber, Communitech, and Waterloo Economic Development Corporation. And we'll talk a little bit about the work we continue to do with our friends in the Innovation Corridor, which is the Chambers of Commerce between Waterloo and Toronto, being that I co-chair that Innovation Corridor working group with the Toronto Region Board of Trade's CEO, Jan De Silva. At this time, I'm gonna turn the reins over to Art to kind of give you a high-level overview of some of the programs that you'll have heard, including the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the Canada Emergency Business Account, the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance, and the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. So without further ado, Art, maybe give us an update on where those are at and what changes we've been seeing.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Briefly with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, that was a program that was introduced in one form or another about a month ago. And again, this came from the business community across Canada, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and some other business organizations who said probably the best approach was to try and get employers to keep employees on the payroll as long as possible and maintain that organic connection between employers and employees. So the result of that was the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Right now, the program is essentially going to be in effect for 12 weeks. It will provide employers with a weekly wage subsidy up to $847 a week to a that's the maximum weekly salary, but the wage subsidy applies to the first $58,700 of salary per employee. It's based on revenue loss. The original program was designed that if any employer, and I think this is any business, and I think this is important to underline as well, it's businesses and not-for-profits, not just solely businesses, but I think as a Chamber of Commerce and a lot of other organizations, this has been a victory for us because from the initial days of the pandemic and when we started lobbying government, we've always said that the not-for-profit sector has a very vital contribution to make to the Canadian economy. So we've always been lobbying for inclusion of not-for-profits in these programs. But any not-for-profit or any business that has lost 15% of revenue in March and 30% in April and May qualifies for this program. Now, I think it's also important that was the original parameters, but based on the feedback from a lot of businesses and business organizations across Canada, the criteria has been revised so businesses can now use, instead of looking at a 15% loss in March from March of 2019 to March 2020, an employer can look at revenue loss in March compared to January and February of 2020. Again, that gets into a lot of local companies here, a lot of startups who last year did not have much money, maybe not any, if they're a startup. So they don't have that relevant comparison for a year ago. And for some employers, a comparison to 2020, January and March, would be more appropriate. So again, I think that's been an achievement of the lobbying efforts of businesses, and there has been that certain modification to the program to allow different levels of comparison to determine revenue loss for organizations that are applying to the program. There was a significant announcement made by the Prime Minister about 2 hours ago in his daily announcement. He did indicate that, in fact, applications will be open on Monday, April the 27th. So as Ian and I have been saying to a number of employers, make sure you have what is called the Canadian Revenue Agency My Business account. Make sure you have everything in line with the Canada Revenue Agency. So when the program is open for applications on Monday, you can do that ASAP. And the Prime Minister also announced this morning that a business can go online and do a calculation of what they'd be entitled to under this program. So that, I don't know if it's operational yet, but Prime Minister said it was going to be very shortly, and it probably is. But again, I'm just going to what he said this morning. Just briefly with another program that we've been spending a lot of time with, and Ian mentioned this, the Canada Emergency Business Account. $40,000 no interest loan that's available primarily for businesses just to have that operating cash on hand to keep everything moving during this downtime. The parameters for the program are originally it was $50,000 in payroll to $1 million. That's now been expanded to $20,000 right up to $1.5 million. So we've just heard already a number of businesses that are excluded from those original guidelines are now in. But the more important thing, and Ian might want to expand on this because he's been doing a lot of work with there've been a lot of business organizations on this. The people who are not being included here are the people who essentially don't have payroll. You have a lot of business owners that pay themselves through dividends. You have a lot of business owners that hire consultants or contractors who just essentially take a payment for the work, and it's not really a salary, it's just a payment. So those people, based on the current criteria for the program, are not included. So, we have been working quite extensively with people at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Ian's been making a number of phone calls directly through the people in Ottawa to try and resolve this and make it equitable for businesses across Canada. It's not just some of our members here, but it's businesses across Canada that are having some significant challenges with this. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce has indicated to us that this is a significant concern for them on behalf of their members from across Canada that made the same points that we have. So we're hopefully going to reach a resolution on this because really there are a number of businesses that are just quite frankly falling through the cracks here and are not being able to access a program that they should be able to. Third program is, I'm just going to provide some brief details on this because there isn't really a lot to provide at this point in time. The Canadian Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance, the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance, CECRA program. It was just announced last Thursday, I believe, because of course this has been, I think, a public policy issue that has come to the forefront right from the early days of the pandemic and the shutdown of the economy, is that you have a number of businesses that are not going to be able to pay rent. We got through the 1st of April deadline, but of course the 1st of May is rapidly approaching. What has been announced at this point in time by the federal government, and it's pretty thin at this point in time. We're just in the very early stages of development, but there will be some type of way of compensating through loans landlords who in turn will reduce the payments, the rent payments of their small business clients. The major component of this particular program is that some type of an agreement is going to have to reach for the provinces and territories before it is operational. So that's going to require some additional time as well, but certainly I think everybody agrees that this is an area that has to be addressed. So, we're certainly pleased that the federal government is moving in this direction in conjunction with provinces and territories. So we expect to see some additional announcements being made on that shortly, but it is there. The program is there and the details are being worked on. And as I said before, this has been a priority, I think, for a lot of business organizations right from day one. And, it's good that the government is moving on it.
Art, do you want to talk about the CERB as well?
Oh yeah, CERB, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. Yeah, that's been primarily for employees more so than employers. But I can recall the last number of weeks we've had some contact from small employers, consultants. Initially it was one of those situations where I believe you were eligible for the program if you had no revenue. Well, that's been revised, so if you have some revenue coming in, you can still apply for the program. So there's been some changes there, but we've also heard from some employers as well that, they laid employees off and some employees want to come back on reduced hours. It just wasn't practical to do because if you had some additional hours, you were potentially jeopardizing your CER, your CERB payment. So there have been some changes to that as well. And of course, that was the first one out the door. There are really two options. The federal government has made quite clear that if you are eligible or you have employees that are eligible for EI, they go to EI. But of course, a lot of employees, when the economy started shutting down, weren't eligible for EI, so they had to have some type of an alternative. And that alternative was the CERB, the Canada Emergency Business Response. So it's still there. And I guess a number of people have already received payments going back 2 or 3 weeks already. So it's still there. But again, what we've always been told is if you have employees that are eligible for EI, they go to EI. And, in some cases, you might have some smaller consultants that, this may be benefit to them. So it's still there as well, too.
And I think one thing to keep to build on what Art is talking about is they have some flexibility there, so that if you've got employees and have some part-time work, and that's what Art's alluded to, that there's more flexibility in the system, that if you've got a few hours to keep your business going, as an example, if you're a restaurant that's only doing curbside pickup and needs some employees, that they don't have to make a choice of not working at all or getting the serve. So there's some modifications to the program, and I think that's important for you dig into the details for your specific example. And Art and I, if you've got specific questions on your company or your circumstance or someone have them be in touch with us. We can try and walk them through that. Just last, Art, maybe you can touch on, and this is going to happen because it's a period of time. There are the federal and provincial portals for companies that may have something to whether it's retooling their business for PPE or other things, but anyway, where businesses want to volunteer or offer a service that may be helpful in the pandemic aspect of things. Maybe just touch on where people can go for that.
Yeah, a couple of things. The province has set up a website that's been operational for about a month. It's called Ontario Together. Google it, and you'll find it. We've sent the link out to a lot of people, and Allison's daily email that goes out as well has the link. And I think it has for the last 3 or 4 weeks to Ontario Together. And, essentially what the province is trying to do is trying to coordinate efforts there in terms of businesses that provide a service to assist with the fight against the coronavirus. Primarily we're talking about medical protective equipment here. But I think, Ian, one of the more important things is we've tried to provide a response here locally. We have, I think it's been well known, the individual Inksmith has done a phenomenal job, really, of proceeding with the masks. But I think what we're finding is there are a lot of businesses out there that, they have an idea, they have a plan, they just don't know where to source a lot of the materials. So, we've been getting inquiries from our members saying, okay, I need plastic, I need this. And often what we're finding is that people are contacting us, and it's the technical people, and they have all these specifications of what they want. Well, we're not engineers here at the Chamber of Commerce, but what we want to do is connect the technical people at one firm with the technical people at the other firm, and they can source proper materials, and they can move forward with the project. Now, some people are probably familiar with the MIN, the Waterloo Region Manufacturing Innovation Network. It's a website that's been operational for about 10 years. And it's been really helpful in trying to connect a lot of manufacturers across Waterloo region. In other words, if you want plastic, this is a good form where you can make those connections. So, what we're trying to do is build that organic capacity here locally to try and connect a lot of businesses that are in that, particularly the PPE field, but any other connected areas with respect to medical technology. And I've been getting emails back and forth for the last couple of weeks, and everybody's been saying, wow, I found this person with a couple of days after the posting was made in the Waterloo MIN site. But, we're working with Best Waterloo Region. We're working with municipal staff, the city of Waterloo, saying, hey, do you know anybody that might be able to assist when we get an inquiry coming in here? And, we've been making some pretty good connections. I think that's pretty.
So I think the takeaway for anyone listening in is, if you yourself or a colleague that or your business, even if you're non-essential right now and shut down, but you've got an idea of how you could be, an example, Hauser Furniture is a longtime member of ours, said if you need temporary hospital type beds, that they could retool their plant to accommodate that if they needed surge capacity for things like temporary hospital beds. We've heard from tool and die makers and those that are in manufacturing, but also I think Barbarians and some others in the clothing area, working on things like personal protection equipment like gowns, etc. So be in touch with us. There is this provincial website, the federal website that can kind of would be in touch, but we're happy to try and make some of those connections as well. So thank you, Art. Art and I will answer some questions in just a minute. I wanted to kind of just take a step or recap, it is hugely important for us, and that's why we're reaching out and have reached out to every one of our members and made phone calls and emails to our members. But we're here for the entire community. We've been here for our members, but we're also here for the community. The two big things that we know are probably of paramount concern to small and medium-sized business in particular are the two biggest expenses they have are wages and rent. And that's why we've been really focused on making sure as many businesses as possible are covered by those programs that the federal government is talking about, because those are the ones that will be the difference between staying in business and being ready to come out when the economy starts to emerge or not. On a daily basis, I have a regular call. I'm on a morning call with Minister Eng. She's the Federal Minister of Small Business. They do a good job of fielding calls and concerns and the modifications that are going to be needed to the programs that they have. So that's a great way for me on a daily basis, and I've fed in a lot of the feedback that Art and I are getting on those morning calls, whether it's with companies that don't fit because of dividend income versus employment income, companies that are have some issues with not having T4 summaries and therefore not being able to apply for the loan program, as an example. And it's very helpful to hear directly from you as members, so I can give real life examples to the minister's office. So that's important. We continue to work very closely, and I'm in constant contact with our friends at the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. So Greg and his team, Ian Klugman and the team at Communitech, Tony Lamantia and his group at the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation, of course, Art and Allison and the whole team here at the Greater KW Chamber. Probably 2 weeks ago now, we sent a joint letter to the Prime Minister and Premier talking about 6 priorities of how to help get through this immediate health crisis and supporting the economy while we do. I'm pleased that they more or less have taken up in one way, shape, or form all 6 of those issues. We will be in the coming days probably doing another letter which really focuses on where do we go from here. One of those things is that with the programs that they've got up and running, one of the biggest challenges the business has is that it's not happening fast enough. We need speed in getting the dollars out from these programs, so we're going to reinforce that getting the application process up and getting the funds to small businesses of critical importance. That the inclusion of expanding and making more people eligible for these programs is really critical as well. And then finally, we're already looking. We can talk a little bit about when the economy starts to open up in a minute, but these programs were really meant for sort of April, May, June. Many parts of the economy will not be opening up because it'll be staged as we go through. So we are already setting the table of saying for those parts of the economy that are not going to be up and running right away, we really need to extend these programs, and so we're already going to be lobbying for that. So maybe we'll leave it there. And Allison, I don't know if you've got questions that have come in from the folks on the line, but maybe we can answer some questions and we can touch on more detail if people want it, or issues that they've raised.
Okay, sure. We have had a question come in around the not-for-profit and the charitable, so kind of in relation to what you were talking to, Art. And the question is, can you define the level of not-for-profit status, and is it a CRA registered or a not-for-profit registered?
I think that the details, it would still be the parameters of your payroll and the income. So if it's on the wage support, it would be on your loss of income, as if you were a business. It's just think the importance of that is not-for-profits and charities, whether they've got their own incorporated CRA number or not, they're not excluded from the program. You still have to meet the thresholds for payroll and income loss
revenue, yeah,
or lost revenue.
Yeah.
And that would be the same for the loan program as well. You still have to meet those thresholds. But when it first came out, it talked about businesses as if other organizations wouldn't fit, and I think that it's very clear that not-for-profits and charities if they meet the parameters, will be considered to be covered. Is that fair, Art?
Oh, yeah. I don't, it's the same guidelines for not-for-profits and business. If you lose 50% of your revenue, or 15% in March, and then 30% in April and May, you're eligible.
Okay.
Okay. Can you give us your thoughts on when and how the economy will open up again?
So I'll start, Art, and then I'm going to pass it to you around Best Waterloo, because I think there's a tie-in here. We're in constant contact with both public health locally here, the municipalities, but also the province and the federal government around those types of questions. When is the economy going to open it up? And I think what's clear is it's not all going to happen at once. It's going to be a staged process. It's going to have to be respect the guidelines that are going to come from public health at the province primarily, and then locally. So Best Waterloo, which is again the business economic support team Waterloo region, is really an organization that Tony Lamantia and the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation have stood up. We, the two chambers, Cambridge and Greater KW and Communitech, are the leadership team of that from a business perspective, but we are getting as many working groups underneath that. Art, you sit on the industry committee as well as the small business, but there's other ones for education and not-for-profits, so that we're asking all the right questions as we to be able to feed in some of the specific issues that certain sectors will face as we open up the economy. And so that's one of the ways we're starting to get information into the province, because it's one thing to say the economy is open, it's another for business to be able to adhere to the guidelines that will be put in place, have the staff up and running, and be able to get the economy or to be able to get their operations up and running. So Art, maybe you can build on that a little bit.
Not an awful lot, Ian. I think, the wheels are in motion. John Tory had a meeting apparently on the weekend with a lot of key leaders in the city of Toronto on how they want to stage the opening of the economy. But I think the wheels are in motion. We're going to be, I think, probably in a pretty good position when we're able to move forward. But yeah, the process has begun. The process has begun on how we're going to be able to open up the economy.
No, but I think the important part is it's going to be a staged approach. So feeding in through us, as an example, what it would take for your industry to get up and running will be helpful information for us to take back to Best Waterloo and through to the province and the federal government as well. So, so there's more work. There's work happening on it, and there's a lot more detail of how it would roll out that will be coming in the coming days.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Can you tell us a little bit more about Best Waterloo Region? Who's involved?
Yeah, so again, it's the leadership, again, is the two chambers, economic development and Communitech, but it really is to make sure, Art, that the regional or the local governments, the regional government, public health, every sector is represented, because what we know is this isn't just a short-term piece. It's not just the shutdown and the health crisis. This will have legs to it, or it's going to be a period of time, and we want to make sure that all the voices that need to be at the table are at the table. And I guess that's the way I would describe the way that's way we're looking at it, Art?
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to add, I was speaking with a municipal city staff a couple of weeks ago, and he indicated to me, he says, we're probably in a pretty good position because we have a history of collaboration here in Waterloo region. The business community, the local municipal governments have always had a very strong relationship with one another. And I think that's going to serve us well in our transition of the current economy into, the reopening. I think the Best Waterloo region exercise is probably a pretty good example that we're at that point where we're planning and we're in a position to do the transition when it's appropriate.
Okay.
Okay, great. Those are all the questions that came in. So if anybody doesn't have any other questions, then
I'll give people a chance if there's anyone come in. I want to touch base on or follow up on the questionnaire that we've been pushing out to our members in the update and encourage people, and we'll be pushing this even harder. The Toronto Region Board of Trade is a great partner of ours through the Innovation Corridor Business Council. I co-chair that with Jan De Silva from the Toronto Board of Trade. Every 2 weeks they're allowing or asking us to participate and our members to participate in a survey so that we have consistent and it'll be similar questions so we can see over time, over the next period of months, what business communities in the different areas from Waterloo region to Guelph, Milton, Mississauga, Brampton, and into Toronto are feeling, so that there's some consistent views on what the issues are and challenges are, both now in the immediate term, but also in the longer term. So they've just come out of the field. I wanted to, and we'll be releasing this in more detail in one of our updates either today or tomorrow. But a number of the results right across the board would show that the commercial rent relief is a huge issue right across the corridor. That there are, one of the things we've been talking about and in some of our webinars are HR related matters. But we're going to focus in on the sort of the working remotely and what that means for our employees, for your employees, our employees, in terms of well-being and culture and feeling connected, because mental health is a big challenge, and so a lot of people are expressing concern about that. And then supply chains and delivery of goods, and those are the practical parts of if you're going to continue to do business during this period when it's closed down, what some of the challenges are of getting goods to market and your and delivery and supplies in to stay in operation. And then, I guess the overall piece that people are still, and that's why I wanted Art to clarify some of the programs that are up and running from both particularly the federal government, but also the province, that the clarity around and the inclusiveness of the program so that more businesses can benefit from them. So the survey that we do with them, very important, and we'll be encouraging our members to take. It doesn't take a long time, but the information is going to be really valuable, not only for us, but here in Waterloo region, but right across the corridor. So we'll be encouraging folks to do that. So if there's not any more questions, Allison?
We've had one more question come in. Have you had any discussions about assistance for the travel or tourism industry?
Yeah, so yes I mean, like, the discussion is coming up for there are some sectors that are just completely, like that are really suffering. Tourism, travel, hospitality, restaurants is one, and I think Art, maybe you and I have talked about this. That's something where they're looking for an industry oriented solution. Both, and I think those are discussions that would be through both the federal and the provincial government. It's because it's a big issue, and you've seen this week some industry-oriented programs for oil and gas, as an example. So they're looking at that one, which is not something that can happen with that. For tourism and travel, there's a lot of jobs. There's a lot of parts associated to that. So we're working through the Best Waterloo. There's obviously the tourism group as part of that to get those that information into both the federal and provincial government.
Okay, great, thanks. Another question came in. Under Best Waterloo, is there a committee for creative industries?
Yeah, I believe there is, and certainly arts and culture is represented there, and so we would be. I think we can. Tony and his team, Aaron, I believe, is making sure people get connected to the right working groups. So if there's some interest in getting more detail around that, be in touch with us at the chamber, and we'll make that appropriate connection with Best Waterloo.
Great. So I think that's it for today. As I mentioned at the beginning, everybody who's on the call will receive a recording of the webinar as a follow-up. I'd like to thank Ian and Art for being with us today to share the updates. To our attendees, please continue to share your feedback and your questions with us. The Chamber is here to support you, so we do want to hear from you with your experiences and your questions. If there's no other questions or thoughts, then we will end today, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Terrific.